Hello there. Welcome to a brand new week. Ivy Nation Sports Talk up and rolling as Vince flips us around in the viewer there. Hope you're having a good day. It's a beautiful day here in South Bend, man. It's
I
like
was out doing bus
spring.
duty just like this, short sleeves, enjoying the sun. It was gorgeous. It is gorgeous outside.
We were getting a chuckle out of this before we were starting. Salty says Brian's class is running long, and we had the we were like, what would that look like if Brian was actually teaching a class? And I think you had the best line. The bell doesn't dismiss you, I dismiss you.
That's right.
If Brian Driscoll were teaching a class.
That would be like his motto at the top. Like, you put some stuff up on the board or on the wall. That would be the motto. It would be a great motto. It would be so great. Love it. Love it.
Everyone needs a hall pass to get to the next class because class has already started.
You get what they do is you get the mass email that goes out to everybody. Sorry, my third hour ran long. We get those from teachers all the time.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're creeping closer to Notre Dame spring football. We're going to talk about Notre Dame women's basketball and what happened at the ACC tournament in rapid fire. That'll kind of occupy a couple topics in rapid fire. So we'll have plenty of time to get into that. So if you've got any questions, comments, whatever, drop them in the chat and we'll bring them back when we get into that. So we will address it. We will. Depressing weekend, but
I mean, yes and no. We'll get into it, but I would say yes and no. I mean,
okay.
I'm sure inside the program they had different aspirations of the results.
Mm-hmm.
No question.
For sure.
Not the end of the world, though. There's a lot of people out there that the sky is falling. Chicken Little is very loud.
Right? Oh, their sky is falling, and I'm going to get into some of that as well. So,
okay. Now you got me really intrigued.
Are you hooked?
I am. What?
By the way, Andre, you told me that the semifinals were sold out, and I don't know what kind of seats you were looking for, but I did see a lot of upper level empty seats at the semifinals the other day. Not that you would have wanted to spend money to be there, I guess, the way things turned out, but I did see some seats there. So Andre says he doesn't believe the sky is falling.
Is the men's tournament in the same place, or are they someplace else?
They are playing in Charlotte this year. It's typically been at the same place in Greensboro. And we were commenting how I don't think they've made the official announcement yet, but the women's tournament is not going to be in Greensboro next year. And we were commenting how they haven't changed the floor design in a while. I don't know if it looked familiar to you watching it on TV, but it's been around a while, and it feels like the tournament's going to be someplace else next year because it's like, why spend the money for more floor decals or whatever.
Yeah, I could see that. I could. You see, it's funny because you see those like not rapid fire, because that's what we do, but those rapid speed videos of like Gainbridge Fieldhouse, for example, down in Indianapolis. I mean, they've got different floors for everything, man. Like they got a lot of stuff going on in March.
Well, those NBA teams, man, like
it's unbelievable, and they're like
they'll have a different floor every night. Some of them, yeah,
like they're legit floors. It's not like decals or anything else. And so they showed them changing over from the IHSAA Girls Championship floors. It says state finals, in the middle, to the Pacers, to the Big Ten championship for the women. That was like. Just all completely different floors. Like I can't even imagine how much storage you would need for that many floors that they have. I mean, it's something else, man.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder how much space that does actually occupy, because you can obviously stack them and stuff, but still,
it's still a lot of stuff.
I've always wondered, like, is it a jigsaw puzzle? Like, do they have, are there? I don't know if you've ever seen those up close. I haven't. Like
they're just big squares,
right? I mean, I know they're squares. I've seen them come apart, but like underneath, do they have like like E1 goes to E2? Sure like where to you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, they have to. There has to be some sort of something on there that where to snap them in at.
right?
Because they do it awfully fast, and it doesn't doesn't look like they mess it up very often. You know what I mean? And when they show like the fast video, it's just like, I mean, it's quick.
They know what they're doing.
They do. Those are pros. They're professionals.
Well, let's talk some football, I guess.
Yes.
Jesse and I talked a little bit about the John Waggle, Rob Hunt press conferences last week. Right. And one of the pieces that came out of there, and I know that this has been a great talking point on the Champions Lounge, the Irish Breakdown Premium Board, the number of practices. John Waggle said, and I'll actually read it right here from the press conference. Question, are there 10 practices or are there 15? John Waggle, quote, somewhere in between, end quote. So between 10 and 15 practices. And I know some people have been saying 10, and you know, I've just kind of, whenever I've referenced it, said between 10 and 15. What was your initial reaction when you heard 10 to 15 practices? Sort of indefinite, I guess, exactly what it was going to be. Because at a minimum, there's been some confusion over the whole thing.
I will say that, yeah, agreed. There has been some confusion across the board. Not you know.
And yes, I know,
Irish
John.
Breakdown and elsewhere.
We are told 15 now.
Yeah.
But again, I just read a quote from John Waggle, and he said between 10 and 15.
Right.
And the media schedule says 10, and that's why there's been some confusion that's been created.
The vagueness of it was interesting. I'll just say that, because I don't understand the vagueness. I don't, like, if you want to have less than 15, peace be with you. Like, that's fine by me, especially after they got done reading all of the people that are going to be inactive, the people that are going to be limited, the people that are, you know, all of those different things. All you're going to have left are the young guys, number one. And so if all you've got left are the young guys, then the young guys are going to get, then they're going to be fine. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to have less because you had an extra month of practices, okay, I have no problem with that. I really don't. But, like, I just don't understand the vagueness of it. Like, why be vague? If you want to have 10, have 10. You want to have 12, have 12.
Especially
15,
when you're sending someone other than the head coach out to hold a press conference.
True.
And you know it's going to be talked about because this, you know, because the topics, you know, that they're out there to discuss. I mean, they're literally out there to discuss, you know, who's injured, what recovery looks like, you know, how the performances looked, and, you know, how, you know, and on top of that, they had just sent the media the schedule, you know, the typical spring football schedule a day or so before that came out. So it's like, if you're sending someone other than the head coach out, you would think that you would, like, vague is not what you would, vague does not seem optimal in that situation to me.
Yeah, it just doesn't. I don't understand why. Like, you know, reading Brian's post on the Champions Lounge about how people within the program were kind of chuckling about the uproar and all of those different things. Like,
you sent out a schedule that said 10 practices.
And they've, in the past, they've get, like, whether there's been media availability or not, they've said when the practices are.
Yes.
That's how Notre Dame's always done it.
Right.
And so now they're doing it differently, but they didn't really say that they're doing it
differently. And again,
differently.
it's the same because, you know, they're like this, the schedule that they sent us, there are like 10 practices plus the blue gold game. So I guess that's 11 total, maybe, you know, if I
think it's 10 total.
Is it 10 total? Let me count them
total.
once again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah. So including the blue gold game, the schedule they sent us is 10. And there are only 3 media availabilities to watch practice. You know, 2 of the dynamic warm-ups and 4 periods, not 5 periods, 4 periods.
Right.
And then a week before the blue gold game, 1 entire practice. Now, what I find even more interesting than the number of practices, Vince, and nobody's talking about this, and it kind of surprises me. And, you know, I gave you an assignment, and I don't know how you did on the assignment.
I did not pass because you gave me the answer key already. And
that's right.
I did not have it. I did not have it.
So if you look at last year's spring practice compared to this year's, and basically last year and almost any spring practice before that, they practiced for about 2 hours. There might have been like 1 or 2 90-minute practices or something like that. Like, that was the shortest. But if you look at, and I realize the public has not been able to actually see it, but I mean, you've seen it. You've got the email. like last spring, practices were starting at 8 a.m. and then post-practice media began at around 10 a.m., right after practice ended. Well, according to this spring schedule, dynamic warm-ups begin at 9:05 and post-practice interviews start an hour and 10 minutes later, 10:15. So, I mean, do the math. Like, they might actually have 15 practices, and maybe those extra 5 that they're going to do that they haven't told us about are going to end up being longer, but at least the 10 that we know about are an hour long each. So like they've, they can sort of spin this around based on the schedule that we've got. They've cut practices in half this spring, regardless of how many, what the number of actual practices is.
Once again, they're very vague because when they have no media availability to practice, they don't tell you what time it starts. Now, you would assume it starts at 9 o'clock every day. I mean, that's a fair assumption to make.
I mean, I'm going right. Based on, the times of the other ones. We know when they're ending. We do know when they're ending.
Yes, because there's media availability at 10:15.
Right. And the 10:15 media availability is pretty much standard with the exception of a couple Saturdays that are in there. The weekday.
Correct.
The weekdays, the media availability is at 10:15.
And I think they're only allowed to do 2 hours total if they were to have practice for a full 2 hours. I think that there are limits for how much you can do in a day. So I don't think they would be able to do like, a 4-hour practice on, just to make up for it or anything like that. So it's not hours, it's actually days that they're allowed to practice. But it does strike me as odd that they would only be doing 1-hour practices. Now, I was trying to play devil's advocate when you sent me the answer key as to what you were looking at. I was trying to play devil's advocate in my head from a coach's standpoint, right? Based on all the people that are out or limited or whatever, you are very much condensed down to a handful of guys that are going to be around, and it's mostly going to be freshmen, sophomores, and walk-ons. And there's only so much you can get accomplished with a very limited amount of bodies. And there's also you know what I mean? So
and I mean, honestly, that's one of the concerns, I think.
Absolutely. And so
spring, and that's what everyone's concerned about is there's only so much, if you cut the number of practices, which apparently they say they're not going to do, or you cut the time of them, just that in itself, makes it difficult to get things done. But that is a good point. You're going to be limited with the bodies that you're going to have out there anyway. So there's only so much you can do no matter what.
So I guess for me, we're not going to be able to watch. So I am projecting.
Exactly.
But like, what are you accomplishing in that 1 hour? I do think like when I would get into season, for me, I would never have practices longer than 90 minutes. Now it's baseball, it's whatever. Like I get it's a different sport and all that.
And it's in season.
Yeah. And my thing was always, if you can't get done what you need to get done in 90 minutes, you're not doing it right. So if they've got limited numbers and those guys are getting a ton of reps in that hour, then okay. Like okay, that's fine. I'm cool with that. When normally they have twice as many kids out there at practice. Because I think literally if you went through and you counted up how many guys are out versus how many are actually going to be on the field, it's probably 50%. And so you figure that's 50% less reps.
Yeah, because when you figure that, like the guy, like all the seniors and graduates, like guys who have moved on, that's a chunk right there that you lose from last year's team. And then you factor in all the injuries and partials and everything else.
You don't have all the freshmen in from, that are coming in. You don't have some of the transfers. Some of them aren't coming in until summer. So, I mean, and you obviously jettisoned the entire senior class, right? So the numbers are limited. And so maybe their thought process is, look, we're basically going to be dealing with very limited reps, very limited numbers. Why do we have to go for 2 hours? That seems like overkill and more of a chance for guys to get hurt.
True.
I don't know. Again, that's devil's advocate. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just trying to get inside the head.
Like the rationale for why they would dial it back the way they are. I mean, it's got to play into it, just the sheer number of bodies who are going to be available. But it also like is the other side of making a deep run into the college football playoff because you go until the end of January. And now to have your spring, which, like everyone always talks about, is such an important developmental part of the
Yeah.
year for your program for all those young guys, to have it look like it's going to be so dramatically affected. I mean, it's,
yeah,
but again, like, we'll get to talk to Marcus Freeman next week, so we'll get to sort of
Mhm.
ask some of the questions in terms of what went into some of these decisions, what exactly things
right.
are going to look like, and get a lot more specifics on it. But it's definitely a lot of details. We're kind of left to sort of fill in the blanks with a lot of things. Fill in the blank is good for rapid fire. It's not necessarily good when
I thought they were very transparent about and we're going to go through it, the injuries and the people who are limited and, all of those things. And I think that's very beneficial, because if you think there was an uproar as to how many practices there's going to be, the uproar of, oh my gosh, I didn't see so-and-so out there at the 4-period practice that we got to watch, people would just take that and run with it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually happy about that part. Can we address, before we get into that, the Champions Lounge commentary about how can you have a quarterback competition with only 10 practices?
Let's do it.
Can we do that?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't know if you still wanted to go that direction or not, since it sounds like there's actually going to be 15,
and that's fine.
But like, even the things that you're talking about there, Vince, with at a very minimum, 2 practices that we know of are definitely going to be an hour long based on the schedule.
Yes,
that
agreed.
They gave us. Right?
Agreed.
And like you said, some of that maybe is because of the who's available and who's not available. But that being the case, that also impacts your ability, to sufficiently put your quarterbacks through the kind of paces that you want to put them through in a spring, when one of those 3 guys is going to end up being your starting quarterback next fall.
I would say I'm not that worried about it, because none of these guys are brand new now. Like,
True.
If you were bringing
They've
in
all
a
been around
quarterback
for at least a while.
Yeah. So there's a pretty good body of work that I think these coaches know what these guys can do. Now, have they ever gotten, continuous reps with the ones or anything like that? No. And they're not going to get that this spring either, because a lot of those guys are being held out. So I don't really think it's that big of a deal, because you've got 3 years of body of work for Steve Angeli. You've got 2 years of Minchie, and you've got 1 year of CJ Carr. I don't think that these guys are going to show anything in the spring that's going to surprise the coaching staff. That's me. I just, looks like a duck, walks like a duck. Like, you kind of know what you're getting from these guys. Now, maybe somebody's going to surprise you when they're in a leadership role or whatever, but I also think that I want to get these guys reps with the number ones, and a lot of these number ones aren't going to be around. Like, they're not throwing the number 1 receivers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're not running behind the number 1 line. They're being protected by the number 1 line. The only thing they're going to be handing off to number 1 backs. That's about it. You know what I mean? And Jeremiah Love, I'm sure, is going to be limited anyway. So I don't know. I just don't.
He is. He's on the limited list, right? Or whatever it's called. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't
individualized
think it
plan. He's got an individualized plan.
I don't think it matters that much. I think stuff they do outside of practice matters a lot, with film breakdown, understanding things, a lot of that kind of stuff. And they're going to get tons of reps. But
if you're Mike Denbrock and Gino Gaduli, and Marcus Freeman, obviously, as well, don't you, I still remember a few years back when it was Brandon Wimbush and Ian Book, and, we were out there in the spring, and, like, Wimbush would run like 5 to 7 plays, and then Ian Book would step up and run the exact same 5 to 7 plays. Like, don't you kind of
like
need
apples to apples is what you're saying?
Don't you need, like, you're everything's going to be filmed and all that.
Sure.
Don't you kind of need to see, at least some comparison between these 3 guys, like, in terms of semi, like, even if, they're not under live rush and all that kind of stuff, to whatever extent you're going to make that. They wear red jerseys anyway, so it's not like they're being taken to the ground. But don't they need to at least have, I guess, what's the number of snaps that you think is suitable for them to come out of spring with?
No, they're not making a decision coming out of spring, right?
And that's my point.
Right. That I don't know. That's an arbitrary number. Like I wouldn't do 6 to 7 snaps each in a row. It would probably be more like 3 to 4 if it's a 3-guy race. You know what I mean? Because if it's 2 guys, then you can do some more. But I do agree. You need to have some apples to apples comparison. And obviously every rep is going to be recorded and charted and all of those different things. And whether it's the first team, the second team, some conglomeration of the two, it still needs to be those guys throwing to those same guys, those guys operating behind the same line. Like, I don't have a problem with any of that. I think that's absolutely accurate. Even if it's on different days, I'm okay with it. You know what I mean? If the number one group is with Angeli on one day and then Minchie on the next and then Carr on the next, that's fine because you can still compare apples to apples on that. 10 practices is a lot, man.
Andrew's point, he says he disagrees. Many expect CJ Carr to be the guy. He needs a lot of work on the field. He was the 4th string quarterback.
Andrew, you have no idea what they did in practice with him. None.
But do you think he was actually running? Because like let's add this to it, because we always hear about the importance of bowl practices for player development, right? Oh yeah, they get those extra practices. That's so important. Well, they basically got 4 bowls worth of extra practices.
Yep.
Because of 4 extra games in the college football playoffs. Now, the 4th-string quarterback is not running, Notre Dame's offense very often in a typical setting, right? So, like, how much do you think that offsets? Either during the season, because we know that CJ Carr was out for part of the season because of the elbow.
Limited, yeah.
But he was back and doing more practice during the college football play. So, like, how much does that help offset some of this lost time in the spring?
I think he was doing more than people think, because I don't think Riley Leonard was getting all the reps during bowl prep, because I'm thinking he was spending a lot of time in the ice bath, the way he was having to do a lot of this. You know what I mean? Like, at that point in the season, he doesn't need reps. He doesn't need them. Like, he knows what to do. It's more of a mental game for him. I think the other guys were taking more reps during that amount of time. So I guess at the end of the day, we know they're going to get 15 practices. We know this now. So devil's advocate, we're talking about 10 versus 15. I don't think that's going to be the difference in a win in week 5. Those 5 spring practices that they didn't have, I don't think that has any bearing on anything that happens in the fall. I just don't.
See, like, we are 4ND. I'll leave his last line out of there, but he says they're not naming a starter in the spring. It was always going to be in the fall. And I get that, but you still have spring practice for a reason.
Sure, absolutely.
And that's the start of this competition. Like, even competitions in the past, like Angeli and Hartman, for example, or name your quarterback. Like, even though these quarterback competitions, they might not announce who's actually going to be the starter sometimes in the first week of fall camp. I mean, that's happened before as well. But obviously the reason that they're able to do that the first week of fall camp, it's not like all of a sudden, it's like, wow, look at what we found out about Jack Cohn in the first 3 days. He's definitely the guy. Well, a lot of what they found out about him began in the spring.
Sure.
Right. And that's
that.
And that's my point. Like, these are still
they're important reps. No, they're absolutely valuable
Even
reps.
If you're not going to name a starter in the spring, which none of us ever expected that they were going to do, the beginning of this competition, like the foundation of the competition, still begins during spring practice. And those are obviously still valuable reps that you're either getting or not getting.
I'm not saying they're not valuable reps. They are valuable reps. But I think there's only so much you're going to be able to get out of those reps with guys that they're not even going to be playing with next year in the fall. That's where I'm at, because they're not going to throw to a single wide receiver that's going to be in the starting lineup in the spring. Like, Greathouse is going to be limited. He'll be out there some. Other than that, who else is he throwing to that's actually going to play? I don't know the answer to that. Now, it's going to be an opportunity for some of those guys to step up, and you're going to be able to see the quarterbacks going through reads and all those kinds of things. I think by the end of the spring, it won't necessarily be obvious to us, and maybe it will be. I'm thinking they're going to know who the third guy is coming out of spring. And I think we could see that. We'll know by the transfer portal. I would still be shocked if all three guys go to fall camp. That's where I'm at.
Okay. So So I mean, basically, you're saying you anticipate someone's going to hit the portal.
One of the three.
By the end of spring.
I don't know which one. I have no idea. I just feel like kind of like after.
I know you know who it's not going to be though.
That I agree with. But it's gonna be similar to Tyler Buckner. He knew he wasn't going to start. They never named a starter, but he knew he wasn't going to be it, so he transferred and went to Alabama. You know what I mean? Like, I could see that being the case. So I like DK's just listing the roster of wide receivers. Thanks, dude. Like, I know what the roster looks like, but they also brought in two.
But his point is, are any of these last three guys that you named going to be starters?
No, they're not going to be starters, I don't think. And I'll be as definitive so DK gets all mad at me. They brought in two guys from the transfer portal, both of whom are not going to be in action in the spring. You've got Faison, who's playing lacrosse, and you've got Greathouse, who's limited. That's four guys right there who are guaranteed to be in the rotation. Guaranteed. So, and how deep is that rotation going to go? 6?
I'm shaking my head. I know that doesn't come across well in my room. Shaking my head, yes.
I don't think any of those guys that he listed are going to start. They might be in the rotation, so that's a possibility. And what did we say? What did I say about KVA? I said he was going to play. I didn't say he didn't start. He played. I think that was still accurate.
Like Josh is saying, Hebert will get some reps as well. I mean, he'll get reps because
he's not going to get many.
He's not going to get the kind of reps that the other three guys are going to get.
No, he's going to. Yeah, no.
he'll get most of his reps are going to come drills. In the first 4 periods of practice.
It'll be during drills. That's when he'll get his reps, and then he'll be on the sideline sending in plays. He's not a priority this spring. His priority is learning how Notre Dame practices and how they do their drills and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So So the individualized guy, and by the way, I guess I should read. This is great.
You need to read Stymie's question. Stymie says he expects the Harbaugh approach, different starting quarterback every week for the first 3 weeks, and then maybe a decision by week 4.
I hope that's sarcasm. Because that would be
imagine.
Awful.
Oh my gosh,
that would be awful.
Andre was asking how many weeks of fall camp. I assume you mean spring, but
he might mean fall because we're talking about making a quarterback decision. Yeah. It's usually 2 full weeks of camp and then like 2 weeks of prep before the game. So it's about a month worth of practices before they get to a game. Okay, good. Thank you, Stymie. Anytime we bring up Harbaugh, it's usually sarcastic, but I just wanted to make sure.
Right. Yeah, so I mean the guys with the individual plans: Josh Burnham, Bryce Young, Drake Bowen, Jalen Sneed, Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, Adon Schuler, Jeremiah Love, Emil Wagner, Jaden Greathouse. And so that means they'll be out there for some, but not all. Billy Schrouth and Anthony Knapp both had surgeries, and they're going to be limited at best. It sounds like Knapp is sort of day-to-day through the spring, so we'll see what that looks like. And then Schrouth, they were, hoping he was going to be back by the end of the spring. But the guys who are out for exactly. Why even bother at that point?
Yeah.
Just let him get healthy and practice, go through workouts in the summer.
Like those guys in the fall. I know as fans, you want to see as much of the actual team as you possibly can and see what they can do in the spring. Not me. I know what those guys
and I
can
think
do.
That's obviously what Marcus Freeman is thinking too.
Yeah,
it's like, you'll be there, but it's not going to be full out every practice. And it was like that for Howard Cross and Riley Mills last spring as well.
Good point.
They were very limited, and there would be days where they would just be out there, but they would be in like a t-shirt and shorts,
right?
And they weren't, they were with the team, but they weren't doing anything out there because why?
Yeah, exactly. Why?
Guys who've been around that long.
Are you telling me that we don't know what Billy Schrouth can do? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
There's no point. I don't know. Reps are always good. They're going to be out there getting their mental reps, and they're probably going to go through some drills and stuff like that. But do you really want to lose one of those guys to an injury in April? Like, that's not what I want. Like, your biggest goal getting out of spring ball is injury free. Like, that's what you want.
Guys who are out all spring: Botello, Ashton Craig, Davian Dixon, Cooper Flanagan, Kahanu Kia, Chris Tarrick, Boubacar Traore, Chance Tucker, and Jalen Stroman, the transfer from Virginia Tech. Apparently, he had clavicle surgery, and he'll be able to do like some drills, but won't be like any contact or anything like that, it sounds like. So, very, very interesting.
Yes, it's going to be a spring like no other. You can throw up that one that you started here real quick, unless you're waiting for it for a reason.
What the spring game is going to look like?
You know what it's going to look like? It's going to look like Steve Angeli's freshman year of him outrunning a bunch of walk-ons to the corner of the end zone. That's what it's going to look like.
Oh, man. And the overreactions we're going to get.
I know. That's what it's going to be, because there's not going to be anybody of significance playing in that game. Because remember also, like, guys that were active all spring, all of a sudden before the spring game, we're going to hold out so-and-so, and we're going to hold out so. It's going to be even worse this time. You know what I mean? So you're going to be left with a bunch of freshmen, sophomores, and walk-ons is what you're going to be left with. And
should they just go running clock the whole game?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yes. Like, I am not.
Should they even play it? Should they just do what Ole Miss does and like go play like lawn darts or something?
You took the words out of my mouth. I was about to say I never want to see them cancel the game, because I do think it's for the kids and it's for the local fans and stuff like that. And it's little kid like Junior that's 7 years old. He doesn't care as long as he gets to watch Notre Dame players out there running around. So you still have the game. But if you're a fan and you're looking to see what this team is going to look like in the fall, you're going to be disappointed. Like, that's what I say. I think you're going to be disappointed if that's what you're looking for.
I think so too.
So,
I mean, literally, they might just play flag football, like that would be an option, I think.
Seriously. Like they do with all the old guys that come in for the that fantasy football
fantasy
week.
Camp. Let the offensive linemen go out for passes. And
yeah, man. Yeah. Even the jersey scrimmage, like, I'm excited to see the jersey scrimmage, but what are we actually going to see? Like, that's a legitimate question for me. I don't know what we're going to be able to see that we're going to be able to, really take away from. Now, if all three quarterbacks get like equal time and all of that, we'll be able to take stuff out of that, like who looked good, who was going through their progressions, who had zip on the ball, that kind of stuff. But they're just, the majority of the guys they're throwing to aren't going to be the guys they're throwing to on Saturdays in the fall. I just don't think that's going to be the case. Majority, I said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm looking at this spring schedule again, and I'm just like, I'm wondering if they, like with these 5 practices that aren't on the schedule that apparently they're going to have, like where they might be. I mean, there are definitely some dates they can plug them in along the way, like during the rest of the spring.
Oh yeah, for sure. And
or they could put them afterwards.
I feel like,
which is something that I've heard could happen.
I feel like the fact that they have a press conference on the 24th or something like that, it's at the very bottom of that email.
Yeah, it is on the, where did it go? 23rd, Wednesday the 23rd. The Blue Gold game is April 12th.
Right.
And then Marcus Freeman's going to have a press conference on Wednesday the 23rd.
Right.
11 days later.
Yeah. I find that to be very interesting. I could see, mind you, the portal closes on the 25th, by the way. So I think that's interesting, because I think by then you'll know kind of who's jumped in the portal and who hasn't for Notre Dame. And I think he'll be able to talk about it at that point and what their plans are moving forward. So I think they're going to have some practices in there personally.
What do you think about what Brian's saying there?
When a coach cuts back on practice time, it's a red flag. Young, new guys need reps. Coaches, too. How'd it work out for Marcus when he cut back on practice time leading up to Louisville? You're comparing apples to oranges, number one. That's in season. This is March and April. Two completely different scenarios, number one. If he was deciding they were only going to practice twice during like the week of, during the season, and they were, we're just going to cut back. We're only going to do 2/3 of the practices we normally do on a regular basis. Okay, that's a little bit of a red flag. I get it. It's not a red flag for me in the spring. It's just not. Yes, those young guys need reps, and guess what? They're going to get the reps because if you were listening earlier in the show, the roster is going to be about half of the guys that are normally out there for a practice. They're going to get plenty of reps. I firmly believe they're going to get plenty of reps. So that's why they're cutting it down. They don't have enough guys to have that many practices and be that intense and stuff like that. They just don't. They just don't.
Decaf wants an over-under on how many guys jump into the portal. I honestly don't think they're going to be a lot.
What's your definition of a lot?
Well, I mean, I guess if I'm going to set an over-under, I don't think there'll be more than 5.
Yeah, I was thinking like 4.5 would be like the number. And I would be tempted to say under, but if I was going to go over, it wouldn't be over by more than like a half. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm right there with you. There's going to be some guys. I think Tracy Tipton down here pretty much nailed it. 4 to 6. I could see that absolutely being the case. I think that's fine. I think that's about right. Mm-hmm. And it'll be outside of the quarterback position. I think it'll be guys of not of any consequence. You know what I mean? It'll be guys that got beat out, or it'll be guys that kind of finally see the writing on the wall that they're not going to play, that kind of a thing. So, yeah, I agree.
Andrew, I think Andrew jumped in a little bit late. I think because we talked about this at the start of the show. He says the 10 practice situation was fixed because, again, from what we understand, there's going to be 15. But he asks, are they still doing a 1-hour practice? Now, here's what we know. All of the weekday practices that, for the schedule that we have been given, the post-practice media begins at 10:15. The 2 4-period practice availabilities that we have say that the practice begins at 9:05. So at least 2 of the practices, if they stick to the schedule, are an hour. Now, the practices that we do not have access to, they don't list what the start time is. But if we're just going based on, the start time that they give us for the other, we know that the end times are all the same. That's probably fairly confusing, but all that we can say right now is we don't have a definitive answer to that because, as Vince said, we're not actually, they don't show the start time for those practices that we don't have any access to.
So I just want to put some numbers to this. So there are 22 players that they listed as either out or limited. 22. And then however many seniors are out.
Gone.
Because they're gone, right? That number's probably in the 15 number. Let's just say ballpark 15, right? So that's 37. That's 37 players off your roster that are not going to be available or, to participate in practice. It's a big number. It's a big number. Yes, you are going to have some early enrollee freshmen, and a lot of those early enrollee freshmen have already been practicing. I think that's another part that people forget. Those early enrollee freshmen practiced all through like December and January. Like they were in uniform in their uniform tops at the bowl games. Like they were practicing full go. So they've gotten a bunch of practices in already under their belt. I think people forget that as well. So early enrollee freshmen have been practicing for a while now at Notre Dame because of this extended, time that Notre Dame had because of the playoff. So they've been practicing for a while.
It's going to be interesting.
At least
it's going to be interesting.
Honestly, this is a situation, as far as I'm concerned, if you're Marcus Freeman, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Mm-hmm. If you have, we're having 15 practices and we're going to have everybody be like, whoa, you just had a 16-game schedule. Why are you doing this to them? And then he comes out like,
why are you going live?
Yeah, and now you've got, well, we're going to keep these guys up, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Whoa, we're not doing enough. They're not going to be prepared. Like, you can't win. You can't win.
Absolutely. Yeah, like Andrew says, early enrolling was huge for Mr. Knapp.
There's a bunch of guys that got a bunch of reps in December and January because they early enrolled, man. Like, they were supposed to be in high school, and they're going to bowl games and practicing with the team and all of these different things. Like, that's awesome. They got a huge leg up.
For sure. All right, Vince, are you ready for rapid fire?
I'm so ready for rapid fire.
All right.
At this point, yes.
Here we go. Scale of 1 to 10. How do you rate Riley Leonard's social media goodbye tribute that he posted to Notre Dame?
Unique. I thought it was cool. Like, number one, I'm just kind of over the graphic with the words and the, Notre Dame will always be in my heart. All that stuff.
Just like the written out thing.
Yeah, the written out with the, the action shot of, what, like, okay, that's kind of played out.
This was like his live love letter.
Yeah.
To the Notre Dame
I like
world.
the live love letter. First of all, I don't like to read. So I don't ever read those anyway. So
never would have guessed that.
So I really enjoyed the kind of cartoonish, and it wasn't all about him either. Like, Marcus Freeman was in there and Jeremiah Love was in there. And, it was about the team. And that's kind of the way he took it. He's like, this team changed Notre Dame. And I thought that was a really good message. And I thought it was a good message to Notre Dame in general.
Yeah.
And it was good. I thought it was really cool. It
was. Like, he says, you gave me everything you had. I gave you everything you had. And, I'll admit, I got a little misty there. It's like, yeah, you did. You did give everything that you had. I totally agree with that. He says one season wasn't enough and it's always been the Irish. And I mean, there was just a lot of really good stuff in there. I got like something going on with my arm here. Sorry.
It's a tattoo. I don't know.
A lot of really good stuff in there. I was wondering like who did, because it's like animated.
Yeah.
I don't know what exactly what you call that animation. I was wondering who did the animation for him. And there's some sound effects in there and crowds cheering and a little bit of the play-by-play. And it was like, it was well done.
It was
well done. I don't know if he had Fighting Irish Media do that for him or like him and a friend did that on their computer in their, apartment. Or
I noticed he had like a logo at the end there, like a Riley Leonard logo. I wonder if that's going to be his logo moving forward. But no, I thought it was really cool. I thought it was tasteful. It was well done. And it was so on brand for him. You know what I mean? It was just Riley Leonard. Like that's who he is. Would expect nothing less, but it was really good.
Okay, so before we get into the Notre Dame women's basketball, DK says, can we address the elephant in the room? Every time Sean misses an IB podcast, the ladies lose a game. I hadn't really.
I mean, that's not true. You've had to miss game. You've missed shows during the 19-game win streak.
I thought so as well.
Yeah,
because that's a good point. Because I was at a very minimum, I was traveling.
Or you were
on a Wednesday.
On a Thursday, you had games.
Yeah.
So
wrong again, DK.
Just another notch on the wall.
So fill in the blank. Notre Dame women's basketball losing to Duke in the ACC tournament semifinals is blank.
It's disappointing. That's the best thing I could come on. It was disappointing. It was, Duke's a tough team. They're a very, very good team. Who ended up winning yesterday?
Duke.
Duke
beat NC State. They won the whole thing.
So, you got beat by the champ that, of that tournament, right? I mean, and give Duke credit. They had to go through both teams that won the regular season championship. So, Notre Dame just hasn't had their stuff the last couple of weeks, it feels like. And so it was disappointing. I was hoping they were going to be able to turn it on for the ACC championship because they struggled the game before, but they won. And then they were struggling in this one, and they just couldn't get over the hump.
Yeah.
So it's disappointing.
For sure. And it completely ends their chances to be a number one seed in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
And, based on the fact that Duke did beat NC State to win the ACC tournament, they might even be, battling with them now for who's going to be a 2 seed, who's going to be a 3 seed. And now, to me, there's a lot less difference between being a 2 and a 3 as opposed to being a 1 or a 2 seed.
Agreed.
In terms of what your path looks like.
Yep.
It's kind of like more pride than anything, whether you're a 2 or a 3 seed. But like to be in contention basically all year long, to be a 1, like if it did end up being a 3, it would obviously be very disappointing. Maybe it serves as a motivator as well if that happens. I don't know. But
you have to sit on it for a week though, too.
Yeah, I know.
You got to sit in that. That stinks.
I know. I know people are upset and frustrated. I saw our boards over the weekend and I deliberately, didn't respond to any of it, to sort of, leave the emotion behind. And I thought it would just be better, to address it here. But a few different things on some of the stuff that I did see, like I've seen the Neil Ivey can't coach, whole thing. We're going through that again, which is total BS. I mean, if you're saying that now, I'm guessing you were probably saying it in February last year when they lost to NC State at home, and then, went on to, before they went on to a 10-game winning streak that took them to the Sweet 16, which included winning an ACC championship. I mean, every time you get a little bit of struggle, it's like, oh, coach can't coach now. And, it's like going through this, that she's pushed plenty of buttons in the right way over the course of the season. And, like you're just being very overly emotional about a couple of losses to a couple of good teams because, whether, were they ranked below Notre Dame? Yeah, because Notre Dame has been ranked high all year, but these are still ranked teams that they've lost to. It's not like they've lost to, a bunch of unranked teams that had no business being on the same court with them, and Duke, as we said, did go on to win the ACC. And, the other part of the, like if you're going to critique coaching is you have to remember that in college, recruiting is part of coaching, and she is an elite recruiter. So you do have to factor that in there.
100%. Yeah.
I've seen, that Ivy has killed Leah Tu King, and, all of a sudden, Leah Tu King's game is gone. She's 3 games removed from having 3 straight double-doubles. And she's still averaging a double-double. She had a couple off games. King is fine.
Yeah, look, they're gonna need her. They're gonna need her in the AC, or in the tournament, right? There's no doubt about it. And just like they're gonna need Hannah, and just like they're gonna need Olivia, and just like they're gonna need Sony, and they had off games at times. You know what I mean? And when I turned the game on and they had, Leah 2 had, I think, 0 points. And I was like, wow, like that's surprising because that hasn't been who she's been all year long.
Right.
Like you don't just turn off the switch and you're like, oh, I'm done. I hit my max. Like I'm over.
Notable. I think it has to be a Duke thing. 1, she sat for quite a bit of the fourth quarter, but 2, even in the win over Duke the first time, she had 1 point in that game. So in 2 games against Duke, she had 1 point this year. They went 1-1 in those games. So I've also seen, like after all this, there's no way that, like King and, watching King and Carlin, no transfer would want to come in. And it's like, come on, really?
Like, seriously?
They're both great team players who are fully invested in trying to help this team win a national championship. And that's still the ultimate goal. That is still out there in front of them. That's why they came here, though,
Right.
And then the other one, there's a lot of talk about, is this fatigue? Have the starters played too many minutes and all this kind of stuff? Hidalgo's playing about the same minutes that she played last year. She's obviously averaging more points. Westbeld and Citron's minutes are down compared to last year. Leah 2 King's minutes, she's playing about 5 minutes less compared to what she played at Pittsburgh last year. Cass Prosper's minutes are about the same. So, like, nobody's minutes are up. If, like, a couple players, Hidalgo and Prosper, are about the same. Everybody else's minutes are down compared to last year. So, I don't think that is a thing. It's just, again, you're going through a rough patch at the wrong time of year.
Absolutely.
So everything just seems that much more amplified. Right now. Well, I'm not trying to tell you everything's fine and dandy. They've obviously got to get some things figured out, but I do still think that they can. It's not the end of the world. I do still think that they can get it going. again. So Neil Ivey pointed to their defense and inability to turn stops into fast break opportunities as their biggest problem specific to the Duke game. Do you buy or sell that as the biggest issue that you see?
I think that's part of it. Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think that is probably one of the bigger deals because I think, throughout the season, their transition defense to offense has been one of the bright points, right? When they're running coast to coast and, they can do the scan the floor and make those passes and all of those different things that, Olivia and Hannah are so good at, right? Running the floor, being active at the rim, making layups. All of those things were things that made them as good as they are. Their defense is what it was one of their calling cards. It just was. I don't know that this team is as good in the half court as they are when they're in transition. And I'm not saying they're bad in the half court, but I think when they're moving, when they're rolling, I think it's the defense into offense that makes them go.
For sure. But I still think it was more about like this specific opponent. Now, some of the things that we saw against Duke have been recurring in the other two losses as well. But Duke is so defensive minded that it's almost like its own thing because Notre Dame still had 12 fast break points, which isn't horrible. It's not, like I think probably around 17, 18 or something like that is, probably been, kind of like an average. But again, you're playing a ranked team and a team that, ended up winning the whole thing. But, starting, with the NC State game, every team has been much more deliberate with their own offense to try to prevent that from happening, and they've also tried to drive to the basket more, so like
that's a major problem. By the way.
And that's so if you go specifically to the Duke game, Duke had 21 turnovers. Notre Dame turned them into 27 points. Again, solid, because like if you're going to maximize, like if every turnover turned into the most points you could get, it'd be like 3-pointers every time. So like 63. Right. We know that's completely unrealistic. It's not like you're going to go down and make a 21 3-pointers, after every turnovers. But 27 points off turnovers is still a solid number. And then defensively, this was the thing. This was more the thing to me, again, like specific to Duke. Notre Dame played a lot more zone because they were trying to take away those drives to the basket because they knew that Duke was going to try to do that. And they had some success, but where it bit Notre Dame, I think, was they got out-rebounded 38-26. And, again, that's a downside to playing zone because your players are spaced out on the floor more and you're not as close to, when the ball comes off the rim and the backboard and that kind of thing. So Duke grabs 12 offensive rebounds and scores 14 second chance points. Like to me, that was maybe, like the factor of the game, when you look at that. But again, they had to do that and they were kind of going in and out of the zone a little bit to try to cut off Duke, prevent Duke from getting those drives to the basket because we knew that they were going to want to do that anyway. And again, like based on where, teams have had success during this stretch, that's been the one thing that's kind of jumped out. But those were all factors to me. But, like back to Notre Dame's offense, because I did want to, like, there's a bigger kind of thing, because I think you nailed it with the half court. Like Notre Dame would definitely rather be getting out in transition, grabbing rebounds and getting out and running if they can. But again, teams are going to try to hold the ball more and try to keep Notre Dame from running as much as possible. And that's going to happen even more in the tournament. Like you see teams, get more deliberate. Like typically the teams with the better guards are going to win. And, like that should favor Notre Dame, like, again, it's going to come down to specific matchups. But my observation with Notre Dame's half-court offense, because that is where the bigger struggles have been. Maddie Westbeld is a stretch 4. And, she can also play small forward. Well, small forward is where Sonia Citron is playing right now because you have, obviously, Miles and Hidalgo, and then you've got Citron, with the 6'1" frame. She's playing the small forward. Westbeld, again, stretch 4, but Leah Tu King is a true power forward, which obviously, is a 4, and she's great there, averaging the double-double like I talked about. But she's also only 6 foot tall. So Westbeld is 6'3". So you've got Westbeld playing out of position, playing the 5 right now, after she's basically been playing stretch 4 and some small forward over, the last 4 years. And in the meantime, you've obviously got Kate Koval, who's a true 5 coming off the bench with her 6'5" frame. So for the most part, it didn't matter. I don't think that Westbeld was playing out of position when they were running those, unranked type teams into the ground, the lower ranked teams on the schedule. But I think against some of these other teams, again, I think it has been a bigger factor when they've been forced to try, to have to run that half court offense more. And I'm not like blaming her for it. I'm just saying, she is better suited to be able to play that stretch 4 rather than 5. And I think that her being in that, that's so much her game, where she can get out there on the wing consistently and, hit threes and, some mid-range and those different things. And, we've obviously also seen her get, her nose getting, banged these last few, she's had bloody noses the last few games. But, it just feels to me like as these better teams have tried to force Notre Dame to play more deliberately, it seems like that's part of why the offense has stagnated, because she's such a big part when she's in that 4 position of the ball movement and keeping the ball moving and, also knowing where everybody else is supposed to be. She's always been such a huge part of that. So again, it's just my observation that it seems like with her being in that 5, it has been a factor in those half court sets with why the ball stops moving sometimes.
Do you think that it should be kind of an either or with Leah King or Maddie Westbeld on the floor?
I don't know. That's what I've gone back and forth with who exactly it should be.
Yeah.
I don't know. And obviously King is such a rebounding presence.
Sure.
And her ability, like all those little things that she does, diving for loose balls and all those different things as well. It's and I think that that's part of the conundrum that they find themselves in right now. But it's also, fair to say, well, you beat UConn in Texas when Kate Koval was still in the starting lineup, and she's come in these last few games and given them, even though she's not, she hasn't been like a huge scoring presence, she has been a big defensive presence inside as well. And I think that maybe that's kind of some of the pieces that they've got to, sort of figure out now to get this thing clicking once again.
Yeah. They gotta figure something out, right? I mean, something has to, get them juiced up and get them going again. We know this team has the talent to do it, right? We've seen it a million times this season. They've got the talent to do it, but they just need to get everybody moving in the right direction and get everybody get on board here. Because, another loss that they're not supposed to have, then the season's over, at this point. So, I'm obviously speaking the obvious here, but, I hope they can get it figured out. With a couple of home games here coming up, let's start getting the train rolling here.
Let's shift to men's basketball. Fill in the blank. Notre Dame men winning a 4 overtime game over Cal on Saturday is blank.
It was... What's a great way to say this? It was exhilarating to cheer for this team again, is the best way I can say it. Because, I've been to a bunch of men's games this year, and they're just not that fun to watch, to be perfectly honest with you. It's like they invent ways to lose. And as, we're driving home from a track meet at Purdue on Saturday, actually. And we're watching the game while we're at our meal before we hit the road, and fully anticipating the game would be over by the time we got on the road, right? And so we're driving for all 4 overtimes, and I've got the phone up on the dash, and we're watching the game, and it's me and my father-in-law and my son, and we're like fired. Like it got us almost halfway home. We're watching this game. You know what I mean? Like it was fantastic. And we're, every time, Burton hits a 3 or Alako hits a big shot, it's like, okay, let's go. Like it was enthralling. It was actually fun to watch. Like that team was fun to watch in that moment. And I'm just hoping it's shades of the future for this team. Not this year, but next, obviously.
But like,
man,
you talk about a good way to end the regular season on that kind of high. Like, and that's what, you're sitting there. It's like, man, they really need to pull this out. Like, they really just need to pull this out to have some kind of good feeling. And then 4 overtimes later, and it's just like Marcus Burton ended up with 43 points, and he got ACC Player of the Week.
I would think so.
Week.
Yeah,
and 21 of his points, so almost half of his points, come in the 4 overtime period.
Yes,
where he fouled out.
And he got, like, I watched him play in high school, and he got that look in his face, like in the overtime period. It was just like that no one's gonna F with me look is the look that he got. And when he would get that in high school, he would just take the game over, and it was done. You know what I mean? Obviously, that's a little harder to do, in major college basketball. But that's kind of what happened. Like, he had that look, and he was just chucking, and it was like, these shots are going in. Like, that's what's happening. And now, when he fouled out, I was like, well, this game's over. But that was not the case. Matt Alaka to the rescue, and they end up winning the game. Yeah. But it was a enjoyable watch, and they did it without Kebajai because he was injured. With a concussion. Tay Davis fouled out in regulation. So, I mean, they did it without some of their normal pieces too. And I think that made it even more impressive. And of course, Burton being out at the end of the 4th overtime. So, it was a fun game to watch. It was a really fun game to watch.
Burton's points, the most since Adrian Dantley had 49 points in 1975.
That's crazy.
Amazing.
And the most any player has scored in an ACC game this year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cooper Flagg had 42.
How about that though, for a memorable senior night? It's like no one's going to remember or no one's going to forget that senior night.
Well, and it's funny because we still talk about the 5 overtime game against Louisville, right?
Right.
It's kind of that magical 2015 season.
Right.
Obviously, this season was not magical by any stretch of the imagination, but this is something I can take away from this season and remember for a long time. You know what I mean? So
that's
I'll
been
take
10
it.
years ago now too.
I know. I remember that 5 overtime game like it was yesterday.
I know.
So that probably just means I'm old.
My boy Bobby Hensley and I were sitting there courtside on the baseline.
Yeah.
There, and I'm like, go get me another Diet Coke, boy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's probably why he started hating you right there. That was the moment.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I literally remember when Jaren Grant started hitting those buckets in the last, 30 seconds or whatever it was. I'm like, I turned to Bobby and I was like, well, at least he's making it a little bit exciting. Because it was not a very fun game up until that point. But everything that started in that last minute with Jaren Grant going nuts, and then obviously the 5 overtimes was just like, never forget that.
Exactly. Yep. It's awesome.
Fill in the blank. NC State firing men's basketball coach Kevin Keatts a year after he led the Wolfpack to an ACC tournament title, and the Final Four is blank.
It's criminal. Unless there's something that I don't know, because I don't follow NC State basketball, unless there's something going on behind the scenes, like he's doing stuff he's not supposed to do.
The only thing I know that I've heard was he was on the verge of getting fired last year before the improbable run.
I see. You think that would buy him more than a year, though?
You would think so, because he wins the ACC tournament. Obviously, they gets him to the Final Four,
right?
But then they extended him 2 years. They gave him a 2-year contract extension, so now they owe him $7.5 million.
Okay, see, dude, just let him. Let him go.
Doesn't make sense.
Is there's got to be a relationship clash in there somewhere? You know what I mean? Whether it's with the AD, the president, the women's basketball coach. I don't know. There's got to be a clash in there someplace, because you don't just fire a coach who just went to the Final Four and that you extended. So there's got to be something else there. If it's just basketball related, that's criminal. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Well, and he put out, you were talking about when we were talking about Riley Leonard and his goodbye. He tweeted the letter, the goodbye letter. And
so it wasn't a video, so I'm not interested.
No video. Yeah, you had to read it. So he thanked the former AD, the AD who hired him, Debbie Yao, The AD before the current one.
She was a coach, Oregon. Wasn't she?
Well, there's a lot of different Yaos.
Oh, okay.
There's Yao, there's K Yao.
K, that's what I was thinking of. Okay.
Yeah. There is, I believe it is Sue Yao. My sister actually played for the third Yao at Kansas State for a year. But there's no mention of the current AD, Boo Corrigan, or any of the administration. He did mention it was their first ACC championship in 37 years and their first Final Four in 40 years, which seems significant if you're NC State, right? Like, yeah. But I'm like you. Like, I don't know like the ins and outs of everything that's going on at NC State. You know, what we all know is it's Duke, it's North Carolina, and then there's a whole big drop off before, you know, anyone thinks about NC State. You know,
in every sport.
They're not they're not just the second fiddle. They're like the 25th fiddle, you know? So, but, you know, he also said that the program can thrive when supported to the level necessary to compete, which feels like
it is
at the very least an NIL reference, if not, you know, a shot at the current administration to whatever other extent.
It's a shot at the administration for sure. Now, what those details are, what that means, I think remains to be seen, but that's absolutely a shot at the administration. And that's absolutely telling as to maybe a beef that was going on there. You know what I mean? I'm sorry. It has to be more than just what happened on the basketball court. You can't convince me otherwise, because they invested a bunch of money in him after he went to the Final Four. And going to the Final Four and you haven't done it in 40 years, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Like if you know, Shrewsbury takes this team, not this one, but you know, next year, if he takes that team to the Final Four, he's going to be the Notre Dame head coach for quite some time, if that's the case. I mean,
one would think
the last coach that took him to a Final Four is like, you know, an unlucky penny. He never goes away. He's here forever. So and that was in 1978 or 9 or whatever it was. That was before I was born. And so I got you on that one. That was good.
I wasn't ready for that. Oh, John is obviously just getting here. No, they're not in bad shape.
They're not in bad shape.
They're going through a bad stretch.
They're a top 10 team in the country. They're not in bad shape. So take a breath. Take a breath.
Breathe.
It's okay.
I'm trying to breathe.
Yeah.
Fill in the blank. Duke associate head coach Jai Lucas leaving the Blue Devils to be named Miami Hurricanes new head coach before Duke's season is over is blank.
Unprofessional. I don't like it. Now, maybe the Duke head coach told him to do that. Maybe he said, look, hey man, we're good here. Go do your thing. You know, be that guy. I don't like it. Like, finish what you started. Like, stick with this team through the tournament. It's not going to change the outcome or the fortunes of next year's Miami team if you're there for another month. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I've got a problem with that. Even if Shire,
I think it's very odd.
I've
never heard of this in college before.
It's almost like it's almost like when Notre Dame's assistant coaches leave to go become a head coach someplace. You know what I mean? But it's actually like, hey, I just found you a job, so we're not going to embarrass you by firing you, but it's time to go. But in the middle, it's not the middle of the season, but it's the middle of the most important part of the season. Like,
right?
I don't like it. It smells fishy to me.
It's just very odd. Like Stymie says, well, Miami's season is over, so that has to play into the announcement. But
Dukes isn't. Like, okay.
Yeah, Dukes isn't. He's the associate head coach. You know, like you said, unless his boss said, "Yeah, go ahead, do it." But it's like I don't understand what you're gaining. Unless you're trying to retain the roster. You know, like
kind of do both though. Like,
because most of this stuff goes up until like the Final Four, and interviews get started at the Final Four. For different jobs and things like that, and it just doesn't seem like it should be that much of a priority for a guy to leave, especially a program that's got Final Four national championship aspirations of their own based on where they are right now. I don't understand what either he or Miami is gaining by doing this right now. It just feels like you would say, finish out your season. As soon as your season's over, come aboard.
Well, and we see it all the time with, guys that get hired, they're assistant coaches someplace in football, for example, and they get hired by another school and they finish out their job with the one school, but they're kind of pulling double duty there for a little while. Like, I don't see why that couldn't have been the case. You know what I mean? Why can't you pull double duty and still retain your roster and still, start planning for the future with Miami and yet still coach Duke? I mean, there's not a lot of coaches on a basketball coaching staff. You would think losing your associate head coach going into March
would be pretty important.
Yeah. You would think.
You still have a current employer, even if you're getting an opportunity to be a head coach. Right. He's going to be a young head coach too. He's only 36.
Oh, wow.
So
I mean, it's a red flag, to be perfectly honest with you, whether it's just as simple as he's just not finishing his job at Duke, or that Duke was like, no, you're good, you can go. You know what I mean? Like, it's a red flag either way.
Well, and I just feel like if you're Miami, like, should Miami put themselves in Duke's shoes and say, like, if they're in that situation in a couple years, would they want their associate head coach to be plucked while they're in the process of a potential, at the very minimal Final Four type run? I mean, Miami was just in the Final Four a couple of years ago.
True.
So they should know what that's like. I agree. It doesn't really sit well with me. I think it's very odd that, that everyone is okay with it.
Yeah.
Eddie George is going from head coach at Tennessee State to Bowling Green. Rate the move on a scale of 1 to 10.
I think it's like a 9. I think it's a step up in the right direction. You're going from 1AA to a group of 5. I think that's a great stepping stone. That's the way you want to go. Everybody was talking about Eddie George for like NFL jobs and like, these big, Power 5 jobs. Like, he's not there yet. Let him prove it at another level. And you can go to Bowling Green. You can be very successful at a place like Bowling Green, in the MAC. Like, you can make some waves there. So you kind of proved it at Tennessee State. Time to prove it at the next. Like, this is the natural stepping stone for all. Like, if his name was, Jim Robinson or something like that, this is the natural stepping stone for a 1AA head coach. You know what I mean?
I give it a 9 as well. Yeah, like the ability to make that move. He went 9-3. I think you get that kind of record.
Yeah.
At the FCS level, essentially a non-traditional, it's obviously not a football power Tennessee State, and he turned them around in a pretty short amount of time. So you get this opportunity, get to the MAC.
He's in Ohio, where his name is gold. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to be able to recruit guys to Bowling Green who know him, as a player.
A lot of name recognition that he's going to have there. Yep.
100%.
Yep. Obviously, Urban Meyer started at Bowling Green before he went to Utah and started down his path that took him to Florida and back to Ohio State as well. So, really good move. I guess I didn't know if maybe when Eddie George took that Tennessee State job, like if he really had aspirations to keep climbing, or because he was starting at Tennessee State, like if maybe he thought of himself as a lifer there, that kind of thing. But obviously, I think his name and his profile probably helped, make him a head coach right away. It's not like he had to be an assistant and kind of climb through the ranks to get that.
So. 100%. And, the timing of the Bowling Green situation is very unique because of the way the head coach just left, and so a lot of staffs are intact right now. There's not a lot of movement, you know what I mean? And so, he's obviously leaving Tennessee State in kind of a lurch. But at the same time, this is just an odd timing kind of a situation. I still think it's a good move for him. I think it's a good fit geographically, and it's obviously a step in the right direction if that's what he wants to continue to do. So, just get that much closer to Columbus.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what it does. Man, I got the sunshine coming through my window.
It's scary, isn't it? Like,
I know.
It's actually sun's out.
Crazy. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. In and out.
All right.
I know. Did the teacher ever dismiss class in the other classroom?
Yes.
Let me go look.
Yes, I've already downloaded the audio for
Okay.
it. So, yep, ready to roll, man.
All right.
Ready to roll.
Well, that's going to do it for tonight then. Have a great night, and we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.